Thank you, John. Yes, a lot of lovely sunsets throughout the coming week, a lot of fine weather, a lot of dry weather, a lot of very similar weather, which actually makes life a bit difficult for me because with day after day being very similar, there's not much to talk about. But we should spare a thought for our poor friends in Central Europe because they still have that area of low pressure there, and that's giving an awful lot of rain. There's the flood problems, of course, and that cloud's still swirling around that area of low pressure, not moving very far either. Across the British Isles, you might have noticed we had high pressure, just a little bit of cloud feeding in from the west. That's thin and high, but it has given one or two spits and spots of rain. And we had this dull, grey, misty cloud blanket across eastern areas first thing. That's been burning back to the coast, but it is going to be lurking along that coast, I think, throughout the day, in fact, on and off throughout the coming week. But for much of the country, a fine afternoon, good deal of sunshine. Sunshine in western areas rather hazy, the odd spot of rain moving up from Northern Ireland into the Western Isles, and still this rather grey, misty weather hanging on along some of those eastern coasts, and that will really peg back the temperature, whereas in other parts it's going to be very warm indeed. So a pleasant afternoon, the sea breeze picking up for Troon. Not good news though for hay fever sufferers throughout the whole week actually, although again the east coast there may be the favoured spot to go to, and it's the favoured spot if you don't like getting too burnt as well, because 30 to 40 minutes the sunburn time throughout the next few days with that hot sun. Now during this evening and tonight that blanket of clouds is going to feed in again from the east, and it's going to turn quite misty in many places with some patchy fog, lowest temperatures 10 to 12 degrees. The high pressure is still there tomorrow, so the same sort of story. Again, that low cloud along eastern coast and in some eastern parts to begin with. Otherwise dry, very warm, good deal of sunshine. Like later on today, though, in some of these western hilly parts, there could be just one or two showers popping up for a time. High pressure is still there on Tuesday, very similar day. But by Tuesday, I think we could well find a weakish weather front, bringing some cloud and perhaps a few spots of rain later on in the day into the far northwest. There's Wednesday's chart, basically fairly similar, rather more of an easterly breeze perhaps across the south, and the shower risk transferring from the hills and mountains in the west and north down towards the more southern parts of the country. But we're still going to have that threat of the low cloud rolling in along that east coast, pegging temperatures down, whereas other parts getting a little bit warmer, if anything, 27 degrees over the 80 degrees Fahrenheit mark. Then towards the end of the week, although there is a weather system that could well come in from the Atlantic, probably holding back until later in the week, and then it'll bring some rain into the northwest. Otherwise it showers in southern areas, fine for the most part.
The great outdoors over on BBC Two in a moment as David Attenborough unearths the mole in Summer Wildlife.
When a fun day's sailing went horribly wrong.
My arm was in the rope and it pulled.
The orthopedic surgeons told us he will never use his hand again.
There had to be something else to try.
There is one hope, a pioneering operation that's already saved one girl's arm.
She would have basically had a limb that would have had no use whatsoever.
But will Dr. Susan McKinnon's nerve transplant be the answer for Brad?
He's such a nice kid. I hope that this works for him.
QED follows this remarkable operation Wednesday at 10 on BBC One.
To his champions, he's a pioneer, the creator of a vibrant new acting style which transformed the face of modern American cinema.
American acting, as we know it today, has been influenced by Lee Strasberg. He's the guy who's this acting guru.
But to some, he was a monster, a man with madness in his method.
He was a schizo. Terrible angers and hostility and even violent. Those terrible lips were...
A Hollywood legend, he was accused of exploiting vulnerable stars.
Miss Monroe worked in my classes, by the way, and the quality that she lit up is impossible to describe.
Reputations examines the controversial legacy of the method man, Lee Strasberg, Wednesday at 9 on BBC Two.
The government social affairs policy analysed in Think Tank in 5 minutes. First on BBC One, the lunchtime news this Sunday with Jenny Bond.
Good afternoon. The IRA ceasefire announced yesterday has just come into force. It clears the way for Sinn Féin to join multi-party talks on the future of the province. Our Ireland correspondent Mark Devonport is in Belfast.
With this renewed ceasefire comes a fresh sense of hope. The shootings and bombings may have stopped, but people here are asking, how long will it last? In West Belfast, Catholics were at church this morning, their usual Sunday prayers laced with a sense of hope that peace is being given another chance.
Well, I think it's wonderful, and it's that no other mother will have to go through the pain of losing her son. I lost a son through the troubles, and I felt the pain for every mother. And I just thank God that all hatred and bitterness will vanish from the hearts of Irish men and women.
In a Protestant district of North Belfast, more churchgoers, but here hopes are constrained by suspicions that the IRA's move is nothing more than a tactic. Those suspicions have been deepened by newspaper reports this morning, claiming the new ceasefire will last for only 4 months before the IRA reviews its options.
All unionists will recognise that they had thought it to be a phony and tactical cessation of violence. This is the proof, if proof were needed, and I think will increase the scepticism that there is about this tactic by the IRA Sinn Féin organisation.
Last night, 2 young men were injured in so-called paramilitary punishment attacks, one of them in Gerry Adams' home estate of Ballymurphy in West Belfast. Skeptics say such violence shows that this IRA ceasefire isn't for real. Believers say it underlines the need to find a better way ahead. From Belfast at the beginning of the IRA's 1997 ceasefire, this is Mark Devonport handing back to you, Jenny in London.
The government has decided to give up the principle of free higher education for all. In future, most students will have to pay up to £1,000 a year for tuition. The changes will be announced later this week when the Deering report is published.
Ministers have accepted the Deering Review's argument that difficult, even unpopular decisions must be taken to secure the financial future of universities. So the government will require most students to pay a fee of around £1,000 a year towards their tuition costs, so ending the long-held principle of free higher education. However, the full fee will only be charged to students from families with an income above £34,000 a year. Below that, the fee will be reduced on a sliding scale. Those with incomes under £16,000 will not have to pay at all. In another radical step, the government will end the payment of grants for living costs to less well-off students. These students will be eligible for bigger loans to compensate. Altogether, some students could end 3-year degrees with debts totalling over £10,000. Mike Baker, BBC News.
The holiday firm Thompson's has moved 500 British tourists out of their hotel after 20 others were taken ill with salmonella poisoning. They were staying at the Hotel Presidente in Portinach on the Spanish island of Ibiza. There are fresh flood alerts in parts of Central Europe after 2 weeks of almost continual rain. Hundreds more people have been forced to abandon their homes in southern Poland and the Czech Republic. More than 100 people have been killed in the flooding that's devastated the area in the past fortnight. 8 people have been injured, 1 seriously, after a hot air balloon exploded over North Ferriby near Hull. The balloon hit power lines and burst into flames. The injured have been treated for burns at the scene and are being taken to Hull Royal Infirmary. And that's all for now. I'll be back with more news at 5:45.
Together they've written the finest comedy.
Did you two see a series in it? And we said, oh, of course.
Where does Thelma think you are tonight? Evening classes again?
They wrote the scripts and you just picked them up and did them. Is this going to take long, Blanco? And my foot's gone to sleep, I'd like to catch it up, you know what I mean?
Created unforgettable characters.
They join a opening note.
They laugh a lot at their own scripts.
Now Hollywood's calling.
I think the next 3 or 4 years could be fantastic.
Whatever happened to Clement and La Frenay? Omnibus tonight, 10:45 on BBC One.